So, Patty, I'm on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, and I see a post from a young man who is out training a sales professional in the field for Beyond. So I reached out to him and said, we got to do a podcast interview because it's been a while since we've had some kind of frontline people on here that are training. So I thought it was a very interesting interview. He did a fantastic job explaining how he's activating these agents that are new to the industry and getting them going.
Yeah, I really thought it was interesting, too, in terms of the diversity of industries that these new agents are coming from. It really shows the depth of opportunity. And I think Beyond's taking a really interesting approach to getting these guys out, equipped to be out in the field.
I agree.
And then you had a really cool, it was interesting, your question from the field today, because it really takes much more of a personal approach, shall we say.
Well, we just talked really about finance and it, I think, every time I dive back into finance and I go through a new advanced finance course or accounting or whatever, which I love, I'm a numbers geek, always have been, I'm always struck by like how relevant it is to our industry. And so I try to break that down and give some really specific tips to agents and to ISOs, each of them respectively on how to, increase income and then also how to invest capital. And so I think that's something our industry really needs to get better at. And then I was surprised about the FTC ruling. So talk about that a little bit, Patty.
Yeah, it's apparently the FTC doesn't have quite the authority that it thinks it has in terms of taking actions against companies in our industry. I think people will be really interested in the discussion you and I had about that. And of course, today's episode is sponsored by Valor Paytech. That's to learn more about them, you can go to ccsalespro.com/Valor. VALOR. We'll talk a little bit more about them during the episode. But what do you say, James? Should we get going on this one?
Let's do it.
Welcome to the Merchant Sales Podcast.
Hey, everybody. Patty and I are here today with Logan Peters. He is a Senior Division Director at Beyond. How you doing today, Logan?
I'm doing well, James. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on. We're really excited today to talk about how to get these green agents, these agents that are new to the industry, trained, active, and really out there selling. Logan is on the front lines at making this happen. Before we dive into that topic, though, Logan, give us a little bit of your backstory. I always love hearing this. How did you get into this crazy industry, and how did you end up doing what you're doing at Beyond?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I actually spent 10 years in shipping, logistics, supply chain, warehousing roles, and I recently got into outside sales, wholesale plumbing industry. And that's kind of how I discovered merchant services. I didn't know anything about it, right? It was very, very new term to me. But what drew me to the industry was really just the flexibility, potential to have a book of business, build a book of business that I didn't need to have someone leaning over my shoulder to be able to build. I had that drive. So that was something that was very natural to me. So I saw that opportunity here. I've actually joined a small ISO that was in a 1099 role. And I made a couple of sales, and I was getting to where I was enjoying what I was doing. I knew this was something I felt like I could do long term. But had a couple of deals go sideways when a merchant said, "Logan, I like you, but I looked up your company. I don't feel comfortable doing business with your company." And I had a couple of those happen to me right out of the gate as I got in this industry. So I said, "Okay, all right, I like what I'm doing. I might need to make a little bit of a shift here, right?" So opened up my recruitment on LinkedIn, and I got this interesting message that said, "Do you know what Bob Carr's doing at Beyond?" And of course, I'm super green, right? I said, "Who's Bob Carr?" Right? So that was a lot of fun. And of course, after some good conversation there and a couple of laughs with who was recruiting me there, who's become a good friend of mine, and did a little homework, and it was pretty eye-opening, pretty eye-opening that this is where I needed to be. This would be a good fit for me. So I've been with Beyond since February of 2018. It's been a great move for me. It was a challenging move because I had actually changed positions like within 4 months, right? And I had that funny. My wife and I joke about that all the time. That I can't believe that I actually let you do this, and I think it's worked out pretty well for us, and we're very happy. But I think that goes into a lot of what we're going to talk about a little bit about this today, and how challenging it can be to get into a role like this that is remote outside sales. And it's been a lot of fun over 4 years to get started, and I love developing sales professionals. So it's been a good fit.
Yeah, my wife Christine and I had several similar conversations early on, because I left the job I had was, I don't remember the exact, it was like 70,000-80,000 a year with a company car and a gas card and full insurance and all this stuff. And then it was like, I'm going to go sell straight commission sales and no boss, nobody. We're just going to kind of like see what happens. And yeah, so that was an interesting conversation for sure. Okay, so we want to talk about, again, taking agents who are new to the industry, getting them trained, activated. So let's start at the beginning of that process, Logan. So let's talk about recruiting. First of all, I'm curious, any thoughts, insights on how you're finding these people that are a good fit? And also, are there any kind of patterns that you've noticed? Are you having more success with people that have a background in selling, financial services, insurance, mortgages, cars, real estate? I don't know. So just kind of curious to hear your thoughts on, that trend, and then also kind of more recruiting side of what you're doing to bring these people into the industry.
Yeah, I think the natural thing for me was to look for people like me, right? You always kind of want to duplicate yourself in some way, shape, or form. But it wasn't just the money and the flexibility you can have, but I found that just the fun and rewarding part of connecting with more folks in your community, the business community, and seeing that you can make a serious impact there, right? So those are people that I really look for, right? That already have that community impact or want to expand upon that. But also for me was, beyond in particular, it was being part of something bigger than us, right? Bigger than an individual, and having a corporate mission was a big thing for me. So, and the fact that we have that, try and support underprivileged youth to get a quality education as part of our company mission. So sometimes that's a big thing to lean on too. That a lot of folks in sales these days are looking for something that's bigger than them. But in terms of background, particularly outside of the industry, I've had a lot of success with a lot of different backgrounds. So financial advisors, they like to call themselves recovering financial advisors, which is always entertaining. Solar sales, roofing sales, and some car sales. A lot of folks tend to assume that car sales, everybody's coming to them. Not in this day and age if you're good, right? If you're really good, it is a lot more outside sales than people anticipate. I've even had someone that has come from almost a decade in selling cheese. Okay. So, and doing very well here, right? That's B2B, that's in the restaurant space. Yep. So
sure.
It's done really well there. So, and even current and former entrepreneurs, maybe they had a business, sold it, or really turning over the operations side to other folks. We've had a lot of success there. So, to expand on that, I've really had a lot of success with folks coming from outside of the payments industry.
Cool. Tell me, what about the W-2 model? What about that model in general and your sales culture, especially, that draws people who are new to this industry? I mean, I'm familiar with Beyond. I've spoken with Bob. It amazes me how many people have come in from, like you say, as far diverse as plumbing and cheese, right? Can you give us a little sense for that?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, it was in my mind when I started as a 1099 role, I was like, oh, it just gets rid of any restrictive nature of this, right? I can get after it. I'm not going to have to worry about anyone over my shoulder. And I think that's kind of the misinterpretation of what the W-2 role is naturally going to be for folks that are coming into this. But I think the way that we've done things in our culture is that it gives that 1099 flexibility, but with the the backing of a W-2, right? The support of a W-2 and the simplicity of a W-2, right. Which has been a really big thing for our folks. And I think that when I'm recruiting and I'm interviewing, it's like, they just assume that W-2, you just got to clock in at a certain time and clock out at a certain time. That's just a mental thing with the W-2, but it's not that, right? You have that flexibility during your day. So that's been a big part of success in recruitment too. Yeah,
I would imagine so. So, okay, and you have an agent signed up and, they have no idea how the industry works. And, and it's interesting for me. I'm going to give you a little bit of just a moment of background. I've been kind of tooling around with various training programs. I've been taking James's training programs offered by a couple of places. So it's just kind of getting an idea for how this feels, right? And, some of them seem to be geared at people who kind of know merchant services. Some of them sort of take a bare bones approach. And I'm getting the sense, since you have a lot of people coming in from diverse backgrounds, how does that work? How do you teach them how this industry works and get themselves rolling?
Yeah, I think it's really funny when people come over that already have that background. It's, you're in a way of doing things, right? So when you're coming in outside of the industry, you're very moldable and you can get set in the way that we do things a lot easier, right? So me coming in without that background, well, it was critical for me to show people kind of the similar way that I got up and running quickly. So, with the way that we have a signing bonus and residual portfolio comp model, right?
Mhm.
So I like to start by building out their personal income plan. I do not like to be that sales leader that just assumes that they're going to do it this way, they're going to do it my way, or what they need, right?
Uh-huh.
So I sit down with them based on their goals. We really, we do a deep dive on their personal goals, and I make sure that I'm in lockstep with them. Again, every step of the way to make sure that I'm giving them what they need and reciprocating that both ways. So I think that's the biggest first step. But also, sometimes a seller will limit themselves mentally before they ever even get started, right? And so,
Right.
or the opposite of that, they think it's just going to be the easiest thing in the world and with little effort, and this is just going to be, their dream come true. And so I think it really allows you to understand where they are mentally before you ever even get rolling. So, and then, the new team member for us goes through a 5-day, half-day virtual training. Each 5 days is a half day, to where they're learning to understand our product offering. And we also have continuing education courses through what we call Beyond University that they can access 24/7 to really get them up to speed quickly.
So what about, okay, once you get them trained, once they have a sense for what they're doing, next is obviously you send them out into the field. But how does that work? I mean, I know we've talked over the last few years, some people who believe in doing tag-alongs, others believe in just sending them out and seeing what happens. And I'm sure there's something in between those two extremes. What's your approach on that?
Yes, certainly. So I mentioned that we do a half-day training that first week. So the second half of the day is blended field time, right? So one of the largest blind spots I was able to recognize from my experience starting out in the industry was the inability to visualize what an ideal merchant looks like, how to identify the best prospects quickly, and how to qualify them quickly for my sales funnel. So on day 2 of their training, in the afternoons is when I take them on what I call a Beyond community tour. We go out, we talk to current merchants of ours, ask them why they chose to work with Beyond, right? And why they remain with us, however many years they've been with us, right? So I help the new rep to understand the technology a little bit that we put in place at those merchants and why, what a terminal's capabilities are, maybe what its limitations are, right? And then I help them understand the value of the deal based on the merchant. So how they were priced, based on what program they have, and things like that, because they can't understand why. And James, I think you'll like this. They can't understand why the grocery store doing $300,000 a month is not as profitable to the company as a convenience store doing $25,000 a month. They can't visualize that. It's based on the program, right?
Right.
So helping them, visualize that shortens the learning curve dramatically, and it allows for them to visualize what a portfolio of merchants might be that they can create.
Yeah, I really like that. I actually have one follow-up I want to do about the training. So, and I know I do some work with Beyond on the video training side. I'm just kind of curious, when you look at the video training, and I'm like a huge believer in getting out in the field. One reason I wanted to have you on the podcast, I saw on LinkedIn, you had made this post that you were out in the field training a rep. And so that was one thing that sparked the conversation. And I'm a big believer in that. How do you leverage the video training though? I mean, is it kind of more front loaded, or do you look at that more as like, okay, once they've got a little bit of context, they've been out in the field, now go through these courses to really become an expert? Or like, what are your thoughts on the, the video training versus the field training and kind of the proper place for each?
So I think the video training is critical, honestly. I actually start with them day 1 on some video training that in the afternoon. So that first, if they're not coming from the industry, I need them to understand a little bit of the basics about interchange, cash discounting, whatever the case may be that I want to start them on. Sure. But that's the beginning, right? And as soon as we're going out in the field, it's kind of the debrief, right? The field time is the debrief of the videos and the application of what they learned in that video training. So I start with it, and it does continue on throughout their career here, the way that we do it. So
cool. Yeah. So give us a rough idea, and I know this is going to vary a lot by kind of the person and their level of talent and previous ability and all that. But is there a certain amount of time that you go out in the field with them? Is there a certain number of deals that they do before you kind of say, okay, and I know you're going to still provide support, but kind of like, all right, you're on your own, get out there and make it happen. Like, what are your thoughts on that transition?
Yeah, it's very different. I've brought in folks that work incredibly different industry verticals and have never really crossed, what industry verticals they like to work. And then I've had some that, will work every industry vertical. So that will definitely change the time frame. But really, anywhere from their first 10 to 15 deals, I really get that sense of what they're going to do and what they're capable of and where they would need some help and assistance. So I say in their first, 4 or 5 months, they've boarded 10 to 15 deals at least by then. We pretty much know what's going on, and I'd like to see 10 to 15, because if they do 5 and they're all automotive, that you haven't seen anything yet, right? You haven't seen anything challenging. You haven't been up against anything yet. So I really like to see 10 to 15 and a few different industry verticals pop up.
One other random question I just thought of. One of the things that there's a lot of debate about in the industry, actually, W-2 versus 1099, is when it comes to compensation, without being too specific here, the W-2 model tends to be a little bit more front loaded, right? And so the idea is let's really get some serious cash in the hands of the agent that's new, that makes their first couple of sales, because, they got to pay their mortgage, they got to pay their electric bill. And then the residuals being a little bit lower. How big of a part do you think that plays in getting somebody up and going, where it's like, not only did they make 10 or 15 sales, but they actually made some serious money from making those sales? How big of a part does that play into the psychology of kind of getting somebody to stick with it and go long-term, versus like people come into the industry and say, well, I found a company that'll give me this huge residual split, no upfront money, no free terminal, no equipment options. And all of a sudden it's like every time they make a sale, they're losing $300, so I'm just kind of curious your kind of thoughts on that.
I think it's critical. I think that's the number one focus that, at least what we have at Beyond, is to get someone started quickly and have that immediate success. And once you see the process through 10 or 15 times, and you have gotten that, that upfront paycheck from installing 10 accounts, 15 accounts, you're feeling really good about yourself. And your confidence is enormous, right? So you can already see that you're going to build that base, if you will, rather quickly, by building your residuals. So I think that first 10 to 15 accounts is critical, and I think it opens up the mindset of a new rep very quickly.
Sure. I like it. Okay. So last question here, kind of about the recruiting process and getting these people started is, the tire kickers, so in our industry, you get a lot of people, because I think probably because of the flexibility, maybe the perception that this isn't like a real job. This is like, it's commission, you try it out. You get a lot of these tire kickers, and they come in and they want to see what it's all about. But like, obviously you don't want to spend a huge amount of time with people that aren't willing to take independent action. What are your strategies to keep yourself from wasting a lot of time? I'm sure you do some screening up front, but like, how do you keep from wasting time with these people when they get into the business and you can tell they're, not going to take action?
Yeah. And we have a 4-step process that we even publish on our website, of what you can expect when you come on board. So yeah, we're trying to figure that out, but it's never perfect, right?
Right.
I think the continuous one-on-one conversations with your reps is really the key.
Yeah.
Hiring managers make mistakes, but so do sales professionals, right? They may truly be excited about everything they've reviewed and understood to be what the role is. They come on board and it's just not what they expect. It's not for them. And so that's going to happen. But I think the commitment is something that is evaluated and determined through an ongoing conversations. And I think that, that 1099 and just let them go, let them run, you lose some of that, right? And I experienced that. You lose that communication, you lose that, and you don't know if they're a tire kicker or not. So I think that's another thing that's really helped me in building a team and building sales professionals. The way that we do it is we have a lot of communication. It's very open, but I think that really helps keep the tire kickers away.
I agree with you. I like that. I think the one-on-one communication, and also I always say focusing on action. You know what I mean? It's easy to have conversations about education. Let me answer your questions, but it's like, right. Like if you don't bring that back around to how many merchants did you go to today? Or that's a great question. What merchant asked you that? Well, Nobody asked me that. I was just thinking about it. Okay. Well, let me ask this. Of the merchants that you went to today, what was the biggest objection that you heard? And it's like, well, my dog was sick today and I didn't go to any merchant accounts. Okay. Well, when you do, definitely reach out and let me know what questions they had, But anyway, that's my opinion. But so, okay. Now we have an agent, you've recruited them, they're selling, they're doing good, all of this. They get that 10 to 15. Now, what do you do as a leader to kind of like, okay, you want to let them do their own thing, but you also want to help them and equip them for this next level of success and getting to it to a higher level. What's your approach there?
Yeah, I think you're going to hear the theme is communication again, right? But certainly, it certainly continues to be the main thing for me. Staying in touch with their goals because they're going to change, right?
Yes.
When they first get started, so everything that they're planning is going to change as a sales professional. You're building a portfolio. You get, your ability to think and grow and dream is going to change a little bit more as you start to get accustomed to what you're doing here. So one of the big things for us is that we have an incentive program called our RISE program that the more you do, the more you earn, the more of your portfolio you build and own, you keep, right? So helping them understand the incentives. I know there's a lot of incentives out there that sales professionals, no matter what company you're with, they don't completely understand. So that ongoing conversation, do you understand how to achieve what's in front of you, what's possible, and do you know how close you are to it? I think that they just have their blinders on, right? They're focused on their pipeline. They're not always looking up, especially in the early years. So helping them stay driven to do and accomplish what's actually possible for them is a big deal.
Yeah, it's really keeping that drive going. I think that seems to be a distinguishing factor of what you're talking about here, because a lot of people are into get them up, get them running, get them in the field, and then
right.
Yeah, well, actually, I think a more accurate description would be very few people are into getting them up and running, getting them in the field and training them appropriately. And even fewer are into helping them once they get to that point. So
right.
Yeah, we live in a very interesting industry. So Logan, this has been so interesting. I really appreciate you jumping on. And I always enjoy when we get to have somebody on the podcast that is, out in the field, training the agents, making the sales, seeing this all happen. I think it's fantastic. For those who want to learn more, maybe it's a newer agent getting into the industry, listen to the podcast, they want to learn more about you or beyond. Where would you send them to learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. That's the best place to find me. And I'm always engaging, sharing content there. So definitely connect with me there and learn more about us at getbeyond.com. That's GETBEYOND.com.
Awesome. So, and it's Logan Peters on LinkedIn. You search for Logan Peters, you'll find him on LinkedIn. And then you said Get Beyond, GETBEYOND.com. Logan, thank you again so much for your time today. Really appreciate the insights and just appreciate you sharing that with our audience today.
Absolutely. James, Patty, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So Patty, of course, this episode is brought to you by Valor Paytech, ccsalespro.com/VALOR. I want to talk just for a second about this new way of doing business that is starting to get some traction, which is phone orders.
Mm-hmm.
You can always, of course, key them in. And I mean, even that honestly is a big step up. A lot of say pizza shops, delivery type businesses that, don't even have, they just have a standalone terminal. For them to get a Valor, virtual terminal where they can key the transactions on the laptop, that's a step up. But then another step up from there is this idea of getting the phone number of the person that's calling and saying, you take the order and you say, okay, great, I'm going to text you a link to pay for this.
Right.
Or you can pay when you come in. Right. And so should I text it to the number you're calling from? And, that is a really, really interesting flow. And it's one that I think is going to continue to gain momentum rather than the person having to stay on the phone, rather than going to make the pizza. They have to wait and say, oh, let me go get my card. Okay, I'll wait for you. And then, okay, let me, write this down. It's like, no, I'm going to text you a link. You can click to pay there, or you can pay when you come in to get the pizza.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be, I actually had that happen at a pizza shop just last week. And I loved it. I know it was sort of like, oh, cool. Here's something we've been talking about that somebody's actually doing.
Yes.
But I love the idea of it because it kind of makes a card not present transaction a little bit more secure, don't you think?
Definitely. Absolutely it does.
Yeah.
I don't like reading my card number off to a stranger.
I hate doing that. And I don't like keying it into a restaurant that this is the first time I've been there. Right. Yeah. So if you want to learn more about that, definitely check out Valor, ccsalespro.com/VALOR. And so to clarify, that's part of their virtual terminal. You can pull up a new transaction, and instead of doing the transaction there, you just put a phone number in, put an amount in, and kind of send them like a text invoice, basically. Then the customer can click on it and they can very conveniently pay from their mobile device. And it's a great way for those delivery type businesses or phone order type businesses to get a quick order. Also, I'll say another really interesting example of it is larger ticket. It's good, but they will actually stay on the phone, but they will send it and they can see that it was paid.
So, hey, I just sent you a text. I'll stay on the phone while you pay that, and then I'll let you know once it goes through.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a couple of good things there that can work for. So again, ccsalespro.com/VALOR. Definitely check them out.
And now, here is questions from the field with James Shepard.
So, Patty, I wanted to follow up the great interview we just had with Logan, and I wanted to talk about compensation, and I want to talk about finances for a minute. Okay?
Excellent idea. Excellent idea.
So, my company is growing and, expanding and looking at acquisitions and all kinds of exciting things. And as a result of that, I have spent an enormous amount of time the last couple of months brushing up my own kind of financial literacy and going through advanced accounting courses and advanced, MBA finance classes and that kind of thing to really make sure I know what I'm talking about. And one of the interesting things about that is, understanding that money is money is money. And what I mean by that is it's very easy to categorize money, not as a rate, a rate of return or something like that, but instead to categorize it as good or bad. Well, residual is good. Upfront bonuses are bad. Free equipment is good. Leases are bad. Those kind of overly
That's kind of black and white, isn't it?
Yes, and it's overly simplistic to the point of really just being inaccurate and kind of becoming a hindrance.
Sure.
One of the funniest comments or posts I saw in one of the groups recently is somebody who obviously does not have very much financial literacy mentioned and said that the people, I was in a video, that's what it was, but he said, the people who make all the money are, something like nobody who's an employee is making a lot of money or something like that. And, I wanted to make a post of, I just posted on LinkedIn, the MasterCard CEO that is at 16.1 million is his current package, per year. I think that's decent money. And so, this idea that W-2 compensation is bad, 1099 is good or vice versa. No. That's not how you want to look at your finances, okay? Instead, you want to look at different ways that you can generate cash flow. And you want to look at the time value of money, meaning, money that you can get right now, all things being equal. If you give me $1,000, I'd rather have $1,000 now than $1,000 a year from now.
Right.
So there's something called discounted cash flow models and kind of looking at the current value of capital. So here's my big takeaway for agents and ISOs from all of this. Okay. A couple things for the agents. Let's start there. When you're comparing ISOs and looking at different compensation models, the first thing that you need to ask is, what do I need in terms of cash flow in order to stay in business?
Sure.
So as an example, talking about Beyond and others, there's others with W-2 models where the residual split is going to be lower, but the upfront payout is going to be higher. Well, you might look at that and say, well, I want to build residual up as fast as I can. Well, that sounds great, but if you can't afford to stay in the business while you build that residual, then building a residual slower, but actually building one is better than starting out for 2 months and then quitting because you can't afford it. Right. Now, again, there are many other ways to do that. For instance, one of the ISOs that I've worked with and a lot of consulting for, I have referred agents over there where they've wanted the 1099 model and they've wanted some different things, but they needed the cash flow. So they've gone over there and this company will work out like a draw with them and say, okay, well, we will give you X amount per week or per month for the first 6 months, but that's going to go against your residual until you pay it back or whatever. Right. And so they'll come up. So there's an option. Right. Then for others, you say, well, I'm trying to retire in 10 years. And so for me, residual is like the only thing I care about. I already have enough income coming in to I can make it, but I really want to build this retirement income. Okay. Well, then look for the largest residual split and think about, so my point to all that is if if me saying what I just said made you upset, okay, you're the person I'm talking to. And again, maybe you're upset because you're like, what are you talking about, James? You should always go W-2. That's the only way to do it. Or you should always go 1099. Then you're the person I'm talking to. Okay.
Right.
Wake up. Okay. Understand that money is money is money. Okay. Residual is not inherently better. Like if I said to you, I will give you $1 million or $1,000 a month residual, which would you take? If you would take the 1,000 a month in residual, you are an idiot.
Yep.
Okay. Residual is not better than money up front. It's just different. And so
Right,
you have
right.
to evaluate it based on the value of it, right? So,
Right.
don't do a bad deal, obviously, but you have to think through a bad deal relative to the value of the financial deal that you're getting. How long is the account going to be around? You work with one company and they're like, well, we'll give you this residual split. And this other company gives you a 10% lower split. But the company with the lower split, they're holding onto their accounts for twice as long as the other company. Well, all of a sudden, getting that 10% extra split is a really bad deal because the lifetime value of the account is so bad, it's
Right.
going to hurt the ability to resell the portfolio, to an acquisition down the road. So my point to all of that is, I'm not giving the specific advice, but to the agent, just take your blinders off of, I'm sorry, but money in itself does not contain moral absolutes.
Right.
It's not good or bad. You can make money in a lot of different ways, and you need to evaluate them independently and then compare them together to see which is the best fit for your current situation in life
Right.
to achieve your objectives, et cetera, et cetera. Now,
Right.
what about for the ISOs? For this, I would say kind of the same thing, but from the other perspective, right? So we have these ISOs that will spend huge amounts of money on an acquisition, right? So they will spend $10 million to buy another processing company, right?
Right.
But when you come to that same company and say, hey, you know what? If you paid for point of sale stations based on profitability of the merchant and created a program where your agents and merchants could get instant access to capital given certain profitability constraints, they would say, oh my goodness, I would never. Why would I do that? That would be terrible. I'm going to spend all this money to get these accounts. And it's like, well, wait a minute. You just paid $10 million to get
Right.
X number of accounts. And, you paid an average of, $2,000 per mid to get these accounts.
Uh-huh.
And I'm giving you something that would cost you $700 per mid.
Uh-huh.
And you're saying, no, we don't want to do that. No, that's stupid.
Head scratcher, right?
And again, it's because of this idea that,
Mhm.
we want to make money this way, but we don't want to make money that way. Why
Right.
not? Money is money is money. You have to evaluate it. And especially if you're at the ISO level, I mean, seriously, come on. You listen to the financial experts that you're probably already paying, that know how to do a discounted cash flow model and understand the weighted average cost of capital and all these things, do the analysis on these various ways and think about it, because what I think happens a lot of times is it's so much sexier to look outside the company for growth
Mhm.
and look at this deal we could do. Oh my goodness, this would be an amazing deal. Well, wait a minute. You have, all these agents right now. And what if you put capital into them? I'll give you a great example, Patty. I talked to a company probably 3 or 4 months ago on a consulting gig.
Uh-huh.
And the reason that they brought me in was to evaluate an acquisition. And so we were talking about the financial model there. And I do a lot of finance type stuff with that. So
Mhm.
I was talking about that. And I said, I'd seen some information. I said, just out of curiosity, you have a lot of residual that you're paying out to the agents right now. Oh yeah, we have a ton. Okay. When's the last time you offered to do a buyout of their residuals? We've never done that. I'm like, okay.
Really?
So before you spend X amount of money buying this other company at what accounted to probably a 46x on what they're, the residual they're
Right.
going to buy, they're paying a 46x on it. You know what I mean? And I'm like, what if you reached out to all of your agents and offered them between, depending on the amount of the portfolio, a 20 to a 30x?
Mhm.
Well, they did that. They spent about half the money they would have spent on the acquisition, and they bought the same amount of profit for half the money,
Uh-huh.
because it's you got to back up and say, wait a second, we have this capital, but how do we invest this capital to get the highest return on investment? And the
Right.
internal rate of return on this, is super, super important. And so all that to say, money is money is money. So think about the return on investment, whether you're an agent or an ISO. Take the blinders off of, well, this is good, this is bad, we do this, we don't do this, and say, well, wait a minute, we, as an agent, you want income. So evaluate the different ways you can get that. As an ISO, say we have capital, and evaluate the different ways you can invest that, and
Mhm.
look at it as just a financial return rather than having the blinders of good and bad on when it comes to financial transactions.
Good stuff, James. Thanks.
This is the Insider's Report with Patty Murphy.
So, James, I want to talk briefly about the Federal Trade Commission.
Sure.
And this has happened a few times in my tenure in this business. It has its eye on payment processors, and it wants the industry to know. In March, the agency announced 2 separate actions regarding payment processors. But here's the kicker. The FTC really can't do much to punish errant processing companies because there was a Supreme Court ruling last year that significantly reduced the agency's punitive powers. I have to admit, this is something that kind of slipped by last summer. I didn't really notice what was going on. But apparently the FTC has long believed that it has the authority to give up or repay, make companies give up or repay profits gained from activities that are deemed to be unlawful.
Sure.
So you're selling some kind of scam on COVID paraphernalia, face
Right.
masks or something, and it's a scam. The way they've always looked at this is whatever money I made on that scam can be taken from me and paid back to the people
Right.
who paid the money. But the Supreme Court last April ruled that Congress never explicitly gave the FTC such authority.
Okay.
Yeah. And apparently the High Court said the FTC can only seek monetary remedies when a company violates an existing cease and desist order.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that really limits their scope of
Really limit basically all the FTC can do is give bad actors a slap on the wrist.
yeah.
And that's what happened in these cases. One, it was iStream Financial. FTC alleges they processed millions of dollars in payments for consumers who were seeking payday cash advance type loans, payday loans, cash advances.
Sure.
They were enrolled in a bogus coupon service that dinged them $100 up front and $19.95 a month. And the FTC said that 99.5% of consumers illegally charged for the coupon club never used the plan. And tens of thousands tried to cancel to no avail.
Mm.
So, they've now placed a permanent ban on this company processing for high risk clients. And while I was able to order the company to pay some money, which the FTC said would go towards consumer refunds, the amount is a fraction of the $40 million that
Sure.
in total losses.
Sure.
And then in a separate case, they filed an administrative complaint against Electronic Payment Systems and its owners for allegedly opening merchant accounts for fictitious companies on behalf of a company called Money Now Funding. It was a business opportunity scam that the FTC sued and successfully back in 2018.
Huh.
And according to the FTC, this company's employees turned a blind eye to the credit card laundering and gave advice, apparently even told Money Now Funding how to spread the charges among different accounts to avoid detection. So now, of course, they're prohibited from credit card laundering and similar schemes, but that's about all the FTC could do.
No, I mean, you say that, but obviously I would assume then what does this fall to the FBI, the Department of Justice? I mean, somebody else is going to prosecute.
Somebody else will come in and do something, but
Right.
it won't be able to, what the FBI and those people will do is go after this Money Now Funding company.
Right.
They probably
Okay.
won't go after the processor because the processor kind of falls under FTC jurisdiction.
Oh, I see what you mean. So, okay. So let me see if I can reframe this to make sure I understand. So what you're saying is the processing company kind of was aware of fraudulent activity going on with one of its merchants.
Right.
It not only failed to stop this fraudulent activity, but it even maybe encouraged or educated them on how to do it better.
Right.
And you're saying that which used to be under the FTC, and they could come in and say, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to sue you for how you profited from this, et cetera, et cetera. Now the FTC can't do anything. And because that company didn't technically break any laws, they just told somebody else how to break laws. Now the FBI can only go after the other company that broke the laws.
Pretty much that sums it
Wow.
up pretty much,
That's super interesting, actually. Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, sure, payment processing companies can't ignore red flags. They're probably some kind of like moral obligation to do
Right.
something. But this puts the FTC, consumer protection kind of thing in limbo.
Yeah.
And they said Congress needs to get into the act and do something, give it the authority
Right.
to get money for consumers who have been scammed. In the meantime, they're going to do everything they can to stop scammers, but they're not going to be able to pay consumers back.
Wow.
So,
Oh, very interesting. Actually, yeah, I wasn't aware of that at all. So that'll be
like I said, this
interesting.
one slipped under the radar
Yeah.
for me, but when I saw a reference to it, I guess it was last month in April sometime. I thought I had to tuck that away and make sure I tell everybody about that.
Yeah. Wow. Good stuff, Patty. Thanks for sharing that.
Mhm.
Thank you for listening to the Merchant Sales Podcast. Whether you are an industry veteran, processing executive, or just trying to learn about the payment space, we appreciate your time. The Merchant Sales Podcast is a joint production of Greensheet.com and ccsalespro.com, and we hope you will tune in next week for more information and tips on building your merchant services business.